Hello and welcome back to my unhinged recap of Desperate Housewives. Today we cover season 6. First, I want to say a big thank you to Annie and Katrina for supporting me and the channel via Ko-fi this month. It blows my mind every single time I get a Ko-fi notification. I always run to my roommate with my phone and I'm like, look, oh my god. It's just very exciting. Thank you so much for going above and beyond and showing your support. Second thing, I said I was going to do a different video before I did my season 6 recap. The little simple video idea I had wasn't as interesting to me as another more involved project. So I decided just to do this first. But at some point in the near future, I hope, you will be receiving a Pushing Daisies retrospective from yours truly. I'm very excited. Anyway, the season 6 wall is here and I'm really happy with everything. There's like a few very obvious blank spots where future characters are going to go and I'm really excited that it just kind of worked out that way. A couple of them I planned, but some things I did not plan and they just kind of fell into place. With season 6, I tried to fill in some of the gaps that have been left by previous seasons, so I got a little closer to the Applewhites, as you can see here. That way I could fully utilize the space. Yeah, it's coming together. I did end up using more of this space as well this season. Like, I'm just trying to fill stuff in. This is what remains of my orange tape, which, as I'm sure you know by now, represents acts of violence. And this is my first roll. But not to worry, Mama went online and I bought some more. This should get me through the end of the series because I was also out of 2 colors of the green tape, and so they kind of morphed into 1 color. I don't want to do that for season 7 and 8. So there will be a few odd green lines for this season, but I'm like, by this point, does anyone care? So the green for this season really represents like shifting platonic relationships, and I don't have as much of like a clear cut like friendship change and people who are in on something together. I'm like, that's friendship, right? If you're in on something, you're a friend. So it's fine. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, there's a nice juicy stack of orange, and then also I cut these in half. I literally use a kitchen knife and like cut in half and like try and saw through as I go. But I ordered X-Acto knives for season 7 and 8 so I can stop suffering. Because why suffer? As Lorraine Bracco said, why live with depression when maybe you could live without it? So anyways, I'm ready to dive in. Season 6, Episode 1. As you may recall, Season 5 ended with Mike getting married to someone, but we don't see who it is. Well, it is now revealed to be Susan, who Mike remarried. And my roommate goes, I hope they leave the wedding and get in a car accident again, and they get divorced again. Anyways, Catherine crashes the wedding on Susan's way down the aisle and causes this whole scene, but we'll get into that in a little bit. At that point, we then jump back 8 weeks. With the whole mystery wedding thing, I have no idea if the writers knew who Mike was going to remarry, because I kind of like the idea that the reason they made it a mystery is just because they couldn't decide. 8 weeks earlier involves a lot of Mike insisting to Susan that Catherine is okay with the 2 of them getting married again. Like, yeah, she's a little hurt, but we can get married. It's not going to be a big deal. We finally meet Anna officially. Here's Anna. I mentioned her last season. I don't think I put her on the wall yet though, but she is Carlos's niece. And as I said in season 5, she's a little bit of a troublemaker, and Gabby is pretty hard on her. She doesn't want to agree to official guardianship of Anna until she sees this change in her behavior. Carlos is insisting that what she needs most is stability, and that she's probably acting out because she doesn't have stability and never has. To give you an example of the kind of mayhem she's causing, Anna pays Juanita $5 to sleep in her bed for her so that it will look like she's home, but she sneaks out to a club, and then Gabby crashes the club and drags Anna home, and they have this like heart-to-heart in the car. She tells Anna she knows she's being hard on her, but she wishes that somebody had been hard on her when she was a teenager. Bree and Carl have continued their affair. They are making out and she says that she will not have sex on his couch because she's a classy lady and she doesn't do it on the couch. So he takes her to a motel, and they end up at Bed Bath & Beyond shopping for new sheets because Bree doesn't like the gross motel sheets. Carl suggests to Bree that maybe she doesn't actually want their affair to happen because she's more worried about being good than she is about being happy. Later, Orson tells Bree that they should begin couples counseling and, quote, guilt is a small price to pay for happiness. Bree later uses that line when she kisses Carl before Susan's wedding. I love this storyline. I love how they are pushing the boundaries of Bree. They're letting her grow in ways that still feel very true to her character. Like, yeah, she's having an affair with a bad boy, but she won't do it on cheap sheets. For the Scavos in the season premiere, Lynette is really struggling with her pregnancy with twins. They have an ultrasound and she's just not having a good time. She does not want to be pregnant again. She tells Tom that she does not love these babies. Tom gets really judgmental and snaps at her, but she tells him that if she can't be honest with him and confide in him about this, then she has no one else. And he promises her that once the babies are born, then she will love them. But Lynette's still, like, not really so sure. And, like, girl, there are other options out there. But this is ABC in 2011, so. Although I will say Grey's Anatomy did it. That was like 2006 or 7. I don't know. Moving van alert. There's a new family on the block. The Bolins, headed by matriarch Angie, played by Drea De Matteo, whom you may recognize from The Sopranos. Shout out to Adriana, I'm so sorry. The family consists of Angie, her husband Nick, and their teenage son Danny. There's something a little bit off about Danny. He doesn't really want to move to the neighborhood. He's not all that happy to be there. Julie tutors him in math, college math. They add, he's not in high school, he's a college boy. He asks Julie out on a date. She says they can go as friends, but then they have a big fight. We don't know what the fight's about. We just see them fighting. And then it is revealed to us that Angie has all these weird scars / burns on her back. They're like all over. We have no idea what happened or how long ago this was, but it seems that there's some situations happening with the Bolins. All right, let's talk about Catherine. All the neighbors are having tea with Angie to introduce her to the neighborhood, and Catherine stops by. She's not doing well, and she is not happy to see Susan. So let's be clear that despite Mike's insistence that Catherine doesn't really mind that they're getting married, Catherine minds a lot. In fact, when a package arrives, and it happens to be Susan's wedding dress, Catherine signs for it, takes it inside, and tries it on. And then when Susan runs over when she gets home, she's like, "You took my package, thank you." But Catherine opens the door and she's in her wedding dress. And she's like, "Oh, I'll take it off. Let me just go stir my pasta sauce." And so she goes over to the counter and she starts stirring this bright red pasta sauce. And yeah, there's some resentment happening between the girls. As I mentioned, Catherine ends up crashing the wedding. She kind of just storms down the aisle and announces to everyone that Susan stole Mike from her. And in front of everyone at the wedding, Susan apologizes to her. And finally, Julie takes out the recycling. And then someone walks up behind her and strangles her. Season 6, Episode 2, Mrs. McCluskey has a love interest. Okay, Karen. His name is Roy. He's a very sweet man. They've been getting to know one another. And while on a morning walk, Mrs. McCluskey tells him that she loves him. Roy is considering saying it back. That's when he notices Julie lying on the ground. Susan and Mike wake up on their first day as a married couple, and shortly after, they hear Mrs. McCluskey scream. Julie is still alive, but she is unconscious and brought to the hospital. Everyone rushes to the hospital to support Julie. The doctor is planning to give her an x-ray, and Lynette asks if she can have a moment alone with Julie and the doctor. The doctor's like, "Oh no, we have to hurry." So Lynette is forced to announce in front of everyone that there's a possibility that Julie is pregnant. Susan knows nothing about this, by the way. Bree and Carl continue having their affair, and they are trying really hard to keep it a secret from Susan. They're visiting Julie, and he tells her that he wants to see her again, just not during all of this. And then they kiss. Julie wakes up and sees them, and then falls asleep again. After Bree poses a hypothetical question to Susan about Catherine maybe sleeping with Carl, Susan says that she would never forgive a friend who sleeps with her ex. Despite this, Carl tells Bree that he doesn't want to be alone that night because he's upset about what happened with Julie, so she takes the motel key from him and they plan to see each other later. Susan has a chance to confront Lynette about the whole Julie possibly being pregnant situation. Lynette tells her that she's pregnant, and that's why Julie must have felt comfortable going to her and telling her she might be as well. So Susan is now the first friend who knows that Lynette is pregnant. And she also tells Susan that she's not sure if she can do this. It just feels different than all of her earlier pregnancies and doesn't feel like it's the right thing. On to Catherine this episode. She tells Orson that she's not upset about Mike and Susan anymore because he's confident that Mike is already over Susan and he's going to leave her soon. She then stops by with some food for Mike and tells him that if he needs anything during this whole Julie situation, she's there for him. Detectives begin searching for who did this to Julie, and all suspicions immediately fall on Danny. They're the new ones in the neighborhood, and everyone knows that the two of them had a fight. But Anna tells the police that she was with Danny all night, and so he couldn't have possibly hurt her. Gabby doesn't quite believe this, though. She doesn't believe Anna's story that she snuck out. Anna tells her that she scaled down the trellis and that's how she was able to sneak out. But when Gabby checks the trellis out, it can't even support her weight. So that's a lie. We see a glimpse of the Bolins the next scene. We confirm that the alibi was a lie and that she was lying to help protect Danny. But unfortunately, Danny is taken away under suspicion of strangling Julie Meyer. Season 6, Episode 3. At lunch at a restaurant, the Solis family runs into John. Yes, John. He owns the place, and he gets really flirty with Anna. Later, John approaches Carlos to ask if it's okay if he offers Anna a job because she's interested in working for him. We get yet another Bree and Carl hotel makeout scene in this episode. Bree and Orson also attend a dinner party at the country club together, and surprisingly, Carl shows up with a younger, hot date. The woman is actually an old patient of Orson's, so Orson suggests they all sit together, and this is the start of Bree's jealous arc. For the Scavos, Lynette and Tom tell the kids that she's pregnant, and a new important subplot is introduced. So remember, Lynette works for Carlos. Lynette is offered a promotion at work. She happily accepts it, and then she finds out from Carlos that he was actually going to give it to another woman, but ended up not giving it to her because she's pregnant. Okay, back to the Bolins and the whole Julie strangle case. Susan finds out that Danny, although taken in for questioning, wasn't arrested. The Bolins have hired Bob to be their lawyer, and Bob informs Susan that there wasn't any evidence they could hold him on. Susan confronts the Bolins anyway and says that Danny lied, and that already makes him suspicious, but Angie says that he was just scared and that's why he lied. The Bolins and Bob have a pretty rough meeting. They really won't tell him anything, which is no help in this possible defense case should he actually be charged with the crime. Susan begins watching Danny really closely, all his comings and goings, really trying to keep an eye on him. And Lynette reminds her that everyone was convinced that her son was an arsonist, but it wasn't him. Nick and Angie begin to consider leaving town and leaving the Bolin name behind, whatever that means, thus suggesting to the audience that they have been involved in some pretty shady stuff. They are currently possibly in hiding, using fake names and using a fake story, but they could leave it all behind them and may have to because of the trouble that Danny is in. Danny's friend Eddie stops by. Here's Eddie. Eddie stops by the Bolins to work on a car together. And Susan crosses the street and threatens Danny. It's actually kind of scary. She takes the jack and lowers it like she's about to fucking crush Danny with the car. And Angie has to come out and yell at her. The Bolins also keep getting threatening phone calls, so Angie decides to tell Danny where they keep the gun in the house, just in case he needs it to protect himself. Their lawn ends up getting trashed, and Susan, deciding to give Danny the benefit of the doubt, goes over and helps Angie clean up the mess. Season 6, Episode 4, Andrew visits Julie in the hospital. We love this. We love when they hint that the kids are indeed friends, because we haven't really gotten that since season 2, season 3, maybe? So it's nice. Andrew Vandekamp lets slip to Susan that Julie actually dropped out of medical school. Susan also did not know about this. She decides to press Andrew a little bit more and learn about this potential boyfriend who could have potentially gotten her pregnant. Andrew won't give away a name or anything, but says that it is a man who is married, and that's probably why Julie was keeping it such a secret. So Susan decides to go home and read Julie's diary, hoping that it will hint towards who this boyfriend may be. There's no name, but we do get an initial D. And that's when they get a call from the hospital that Julie is awake. Okay, on to the Solisas. John drives Anna home from work, which upsets Gabby. And then Celia and Juanita find condoms under Anna's bed. So Gabby confronts her about it, and she says that she hasn't had sex. She definitely hasn't had sex with John, but she does plan to. She also tells her that she's in love with John. So Gabby decides to go talk to John about all of this. He says that he was only making moves on Anna to see if it would make Gabby jealous, and then he kisses her. Gabby decides to come clean with Anna about her past affair with John, hoping that she will lose interest. She explains that she no longer has feelings for John and has no desire to go back to him, so Anna decides not to tell Carlos about any of this renewed drama. Okay, on to the Scavos. This episode contains one of the most... This episode contains one of the silliest Scavo subplots in the entire series. Lynette is entering her second trimester, and thus her breasts begin to change in appearance. Enough so that it is very noticeable to everyone. However, she cannot tell Carlos she's pregnant because, remember, she took this promotion and then found out that Carlos didn't promote someone else because they were pregnant, right? So this whole secret. But Carlos notices her change in appearance, and he comments on her boob job. And so Lynette has to be like, yup, I got a boob job. Carlos then wants to use Lynette's boobs to try and get men to sign on better deals and things and use them as leverage. And he's like, well, you got them to use them, right? And she's like, it's this whole messy thing, you guys. Later on, Tom says he has no complaints about Lynette's breasts, and she asks Tom if he ever feels like he compromised because he's a man who likes women with large breasts and she does not have them except when she's pregnant. He says yes, he does feel like he compromised. However, it's good that she's not perfect because he's not perfect either. I can't, I'm walking away. Oh my god. I could not believe what was unfolding before me during this scene. Like, Tom, get up. Oh my god. Okay, moving on to Catherine. So, Catherine is up bright and early in the test kitchen, cooking away, and she says that she's been there since like 3 a.m. and she has so much energy, seems to be over the moon. She tells Bree that she is so happy because she is in love. And Bree's like, oh, that's great, because this means she's moving on. But Catherine says she's in love with Mike. Bree then catches Catherine spying on Susan and Mike through their window. She tells her the next day that if she cannot accept that Mike is not coming back to her, then she needs to get some help. Bree then decides to put Catherine on sick leave for 3 weeks. But Catherine tells Bree that this job is all she has. She needs to have something to focus her energy on while she sorts out everything else that's messy in her life. So they end up catering a wedding together, and the cake comes out. And the design, which the newlywed couple saw in the test kitchen office, turns out to be something that Catherine sketched up for her imaginary wedding with Mike. So seeing the cake upsets her, she tries to destroy it, has this whole breakdown. So Bree decides to fire Catherine, and she tells her that she's only doing this because she's her friend. Catherine then walks along Bree's car, scratching it with her key before she hands the keys over to Bree. It's bad out here. And finally, the bowl ends. Danny asks Angie if she plans to get her scars fixed one day. She says no, and she shares that after the explosion, Nick took really good care of her. Danny tells Angie that one day he will make a lot of money and he will be able to take care of her. Also in this episode, Danny says to Nick, quote, I know, and Nick looks real scared. So there's some sort of secret that Danny knows, and now Nick knows he knows. Not everyone else can know he knows, right? And then Nick visits Julie at the hospital and says, hi, Julie, it's Dominic. I miss you. That's the D! That's the D initial. It's Dominic. His name's not Nick. It's Dominic. Holy shit. Season 6, episode 5. Julie comes home from the hospital. Danny is upset because he has found out that Julie and Dominic have slept together. He threatens to tell his mom. Meanwhile, Julie is having a hard time sleeping, so Danny tells her that he has something that he thinks will help. There is a whole Gabby mom drama subplot this episode, but I just want to point out one funny line. There's this whole birthday party and a monkey and a clown. All hell breaks loose at this party, so it's just a disaster, right? When this incident happened, Celia and Juanita ran into the bouncy house, zipped it up, and played dead. Carlos says that Gabby is a great mom, and the girls know how to look out for themselves because she's not a helicopter parent, and that's okay. Bree and Carl's affair is as strong as ever, and there's a very judgmental hotel maid who is judging Bree for having an affair. This is a wonderful episode for Marsha. She kills it. There's so much range in this episode for her to play with. There's like 3 scenes with this maid, all incredible stuff. So I love this episode for the Carl and Bree storyline. It's one of my favorites of this arc. We also get a Lynette and Tom storyline. So long story short, Lynette hires Roy to help her fix up some little things around the house and the yard and whatnot. But he starts going over her head and doing it in the way that Tom requested it, not the way that Lynette requested it. So Tom has to go over to talk to Roy, and he explains to Roy that he knows Lynette is a little bit of a control freak, but it's because she did not have a stable childhood and she always had to take care of everyone else. So if she is in control, she feels safe. And he loves her, and so he's going to make sure that she feels in control so that she can be safe. See, this is the Tom Scobble that the people deserve and that the people want. But is it the Tom Scobble that we are usually given? No. Remember last episode? If you like Tom, cling on to this moment for all it's worth, okay? Because of Julie's attempted murder, there is now a neighborhood watch program. This is not the first time Wisteria Lane has come together to form a neighborhood watch. They also did it in season 2 after Gabby was startled by Caleb when he broke into the house. You may remember. So neighborhood watch is not a new concept for Wisteria Lane. But at the meeting, Catherine is just eyeing Mike the whole time. And Susan does not let her volunteer because Susan's kind of running the meeting. That night, Catherine lurks once again around the windows, and Julie hears someone outside. She freaks out. So Julie takes out the gun that Danny gave her, which is the item that he said would help her feel safe. And Susan takes it from Julie and shoots the lurker. And it's Catherine, and she has been shot in the arm by Susan. Now remember, this is the Bolin's gun. So Angie is like, fuck, because now her gun has been used to shoot someone else. So she goes to Catherine to talk to her. The bullet barely grazed Catherine's arm, so Angie can clean her up. No need to call an ambulance. And also, no need to even report this to the police. You know why? Because Susan could get in big trouble. If Susan goes to jail, then Mike will be upset with Catherine for making the mother of his child, MJ, go to jail. Therefore, it's in Catherine's best interest not to report it. And boom, just like that, Angie has protected her family of the gun, which is registered under their real name. Season 6, episode 6. Juanita gets in big trouble at school after she says the F word at her Thanksgiving pageant when she forgets her lines. She has to write a letter of apology to the whole school, and she's also assigned to cafeteria cleaning duty for saying the bad word. So Gabby tells the principal to go fuck herself, but it's censored because it's ABC, and she pulls Juanita out of school. However, there are no openings at the private schools nearby, so this means Gabby has to homeschool Juanita. And now for some Abby lore. Did y'all know I was homeschooled? I just thought it'd be a fun fact to share. I was homeschooled from 3rd grade until high school, and at that point I started taking classes at the local community college, and that was just like my high school and my first part of college. So there you go. There's the Abby lore of the day. Anyway, homeschooling is not going well for Juanita, and Gabby asks, "Do you still think I'm a good mom?" And Juanita says nothing. Bree is realizing she's actually starting to have some deeper feelings for Carl. Carl presents her with a brooch. There's this whole thing this episode because Bree wears the brooch to a dinner party, and Susan recognizes it because it's a brooch that Carl gave to her and she hasn't seen in years. She can't tell everyone because no one knows about the affair, including and perhaps especially Orson. So she's like, oh, I bought it at the antique store on Main Street. And they're like, oh my god, that's crazy. But then Bree decides to give the brooch to Susan because she's like, it's yours. I'm so sorry. Susan ends up not wanting it though, so she gives it back to Bree because she's not really interested in having anything to do with Carl anymore. Bree decides she's going to really end things with Carl because it was meant to be a little affair, nothing serious. But then he asks her to marry him. Bree says she will not say yes or no until she's officially divorced, and there are some conditions. He really needs to prove that he has changed as a man. So she gives back the brooch and says that he can give it to her when he's ready to show that he has changed. Orson then goes to the antique store where Bree allegedly bought the brooch and asks the shopkeeper about it, and he says they do not sell anything like that. They're only furniture, meaning Orson has officially caught Bree in a lie. There's also a scene in this episode where Susan talks about how she always knew that Carl was cheating on her, and it was this big thing the whole time they were married that she knew he was cheating. But in season 1, we learned that Carl kissed Edie once at a holiday party, and Carl slept with his secretary Brandy, who he leaves Susan for eventually, and that was it. He was not a serial cheater, and that is important to the character because Susan did not know she married a bad man. She thinks the marriage is perfect, and then one day she's suddenly blindsided by him leaving her. Like, is that not a huge part of like the season 1 and season 2 Carl and Edie lore? What gives? What's the deal with Carl? Catherine stops by to apologize to Susan for letting her emotions get the best of her that night when she was peeking in the window. They agree that they will do brunch together and that things will be resolved. Catherine then reports to Angie that their plan of taking the high road to get Mike back is going very well. Later that night, Catherine sets up champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, and then she tells Mike that there is a plumbing emergency and she needs to see him immediately. Susan, not being an idiot, which is a sentence that I never thought I'd say, goes over with Mike, and thank God she did, because lo and behold, she was indeed planning to seduce Mike. So the girls end up having this big fight, and they like push each other in the bathtub. A little bit of bowling action this episode. Angie is on the phone with her mom, who she told Catherine was dead. She apologizes to her mom for taking so long to call her and says that it's just not safe for her to do so right now. And Catherine comes by and overhears part of her phone call. Angie covers how she can, but it's clear that now Catherine has reason to be suspicious of Angie and perhaps has caught Angie in a lie, which is just going to put the Bolins under even more scrutiny. So, once again, thinking ahead, Angie goes to Susan and warns her that Catherine may be a threat and that she may have even had something to do with Julie's attack. She suggests that maybe Catherine thought it was Susan outside. Thus, when she allegedly attacked Julie, she thought it was Susan. Season 6, episode 7. We find out that Julie first met Dominic when she started tutoring Danny. I personally have some questions about this whole timeline, but we're just gonna cast that aside. Lynette stops by to drop something off, and she hears Julie and Nick arguing. Lynette comforts Julie, so Julie tells Lynette the truth about her affair with Nick. Lynette tells Julie that she will handle this and she will not tell Susan about the affair. And for the first time in weeks, Julie has no trouble sleeping at night. Meanwhile, Susan goes to the police to tell them about Catherine possibly being involved with Julie's strangulation. Just a day in the life. I'm always fixing this damn tape. The detective, for reasons in their personal history and high school and stuff, does not like Susan. The detective informs Susan that Catherine was on the phone with her daughter all night the night that Julie was attacked. Also, Susan broke the law by not reporting that she shot Catherine. Therefore, Susan is arrested. It's not really a big deal though. Susan is sentenced to some community service, and that's that. Bree and Orson have dinner with Angie and Nick, and it is a delicious Italian feast. And this is when Angie and Nick suggest that maybe Angie could work for Bree. And Bree says she is not hiring. But then there's this couple she is catering for who wants some simpler food than the really fancy stuff she serves. So she realizes that Angie's food would actually be perfect. So first she tries to steal Angie's family recipes and pass them off as her own. It's just kind of a disaster. So Angie steps in, saves the day, and Bree hires her. Angie asks Bree, though, why she hates her, and Bree says she doesn't hate her, she just doesn't like how her problems are out in the world for everyone to see. And then Bree confides in her about her own marriage problems. Angie agrees to help her with whatever she can. Later on, Orson gives Bree a brooch just like the one Carl gave her, and Bree tells him that she doesn't want jewelry, she just wants out. Orson needs to let this go, and it's so frustrating because I feel like we've been dealing with this for like 10 episodes now. Like the whole thing where Carl sent someone to beat him up and tell him to let go, that was a while ago. It has been months. Anyways, Lynette goes over and warns Nick to leave Julie alone. And then Nick says that if she tells anyone about the affair, then she's the one who will have to worry. And then Nick says that if she tells anyone about the affair, then she's the one who has to worry. So this kind of freaks Lynette out. So she rushes home and tells Tom that she thinks she knows who might have strangled Julie. The two of them go to the police and tell them about Nick's affair with Julie. When Nick gets home, Angie tells him that the police called and asked him about an alibi the night that Julie was strangled. She has presumably been told about the affair by the police, and she tells Nick that she forgives him for this one thing, and that she told them that he was with her all night so that he won't have to worry about getting into any trouble. But she's only forgiving him for this because she has put him through a lot. And then she punches him. Season 6, Episode 8. Gabby and Carlos are desperately trying to find a private school for Juanita to be enrolled in. Then they realize that one of Lynette's coworkers, so someone who also works for Carlos, has a kid who is enrolled in a Catholic school nearby. So Gabby and Carlos plan to give this coworker a promotion in Florida. That way he has to move to take the job, and therefore the place in the school will be opened up. However, this creates some conflict because Lynette had in mind that that person would cover her when she was on maternity leave. So now they're in all sorts of trouble. Lynette and Tom end up scaring her coworker out of moving to Florida so that he'll stay in town. But of course, this is disastrous for Gabby and Carlos, who really need that spot open at the school. So Gabby goes to confront Lynette about why she would say those things to this coworker. They're like both in a bind. I really like this conflict. It's very interesting because we are in on the secret and they are both dealing with their own selfish reasons for wanting to do things. Lynette is kind of cornered into telling Gabby the truth about being pregnant. Gabby is not too pleased to hear this because, one, it means that Lynette sort of betrayed Carlos by keeping the secret from him, and two, it means that Lynette never trusted Gabby enough as a friend to tell her the truth. So to resolve this whole situation, Carlos offers Lynette the position in Florida. He says that if she decides to quit instead of take the position, then that's on her. So this is kind of his way of firing her, but not. So that way he can't be accused of firing her because she's pregnant. Bree and Carl go to the opera, and when Bree gets home, Orson is listening to that very opera on CD. I think it's Madame Butterfly. Angie stops by later for some work stuff, and Orson gets to talk to her. He tells Angie that he thinks Bree is having an affair. Orson has to go away for a weekend for a work trip, and he asks Angie if she will kind of keep an eye on things for him. And he implies that if Bree was betraying him, then he might do something silly and his own life, such as in Madame Butterfly. So Angie, being the girl's girl that she is, goes and tells Bree that Orson is suspicious of her. This makes Bree call Carl and tell him that they should not see each other, period, until she is officially divorced. But Carl goes over that night and he tells Bree that he has an idea that might get her the divorce a little sooner. Angie is kind of keeping an eye on things, and it's a good thing she does because right when Bree and Carl go upstairs and are gonna, do some things, Orson gets home. And before he can walk in and bust them, Angie rings up Bree on her cell and warns her that Orson is home and that they are about to be caught. So Carl can crawl out the window and everything is okay. And Angie saved the day. So shout out to Angie. And finally, Nick is on a phone call on a prepaid phone while he sits inside of a cafe. The waitress overhears some of the phone call. It sounds a little suspicious, but we don't know too much about who he's talking to or really what the conversation is concerning, just that it's something secretive and on a prepaid phone. That night, when the cafe closes, somebody steps into the cafe, strangles the waitress, and kills her. There is a fucking serial killer in Fairview. Crime? On my Wisteria Lane? Who would have thought? Season 6, Episode 9. Julie is paranoid once again after this second murder. The killer obviously knows where she lives since she was attacked, so Carl agrees to switch cars with her. That way, at least she can be around town and it won't be as big of a deal. Susan is driving by the motel and she sees Julie's car parked at the motel. She assumes it's Julie driving the car because she does not know that Carl and Julie swapped. So she goes to catch Julie with whatever married man she's sleeping with. Susan catches Carl and Bree. Presumably. Speaking of Bree, there's that whole divorce thing going on. She basically comes up with the idea to get Orson to break his parole. Remember, Orson went to prison for the hit and run of Mike Delfino. Her and Carl's idea is that if he breaks parole, then they can use that to blackmail Orson into signing the divorce papers. So she visits one of Orson's prison friends and tries to get him to come around and check on Orson, because if the two of them were seen together, that would be breaking their parole. That is one part of Bree's story this episode. And then the other part is at a self-defense class they're taking together because of the serial killer on the loose. Susan makes it known to Bree that she knows about her and Carl. And this is when Bree admits out loud to Susan that she is in love with Carl. Okay, Lynette. Carlos moves Lynette's desk into this tiny supply closet, and Gabby tells Lynette she's not going to talk to Carlos about saving her job since Lynette never trusted her in the first place to tell her about the pregnancy. But Gabby does decide to do so, and she talks to Carlos that night and tries to encourage him to go a little easier on Lynette. But that night, Lynette and Tom are talking, and they've decided they are going to sue Carlos for creating a hostile work environment. So imagine the scene. We're on Wisteria Lane. The papers are going to be served any minute, and then Gabby comes to Lynette with candy and flowers and tells her that the whole thing is over and Carlos has agreed to forgive her. And then the man serves Carlos papers, and Gabby retracts her apology, and the two couples are now at war. At the office, Carlos then purposefully sets Lynette up to fail at this huge project, and when she fails to complete this very unreasonable workload, Carlos then fires her. He just had to make it seem like he had a reason to. So, Okay, on to Catherine, and we're getting into some pretty juicy territory here. Catherine kind of dumps all of her problems on poor little MJ, like telling him how she's sad and lonely and all this stuff. I think he had like thrown a ball into her yard and went to grab it and was like, hi, and she was like, hi, MJ, and they talked, or she talked at him. So Mike tells Catherine that if she ever bothers MJ again, she will be sorry. Catherine does not heed this warning though, and she decides to pick MJ up from a party. Susan or Mike, I don't remember, was supposed to pick him up from this party, but they get there and he's just gone. And the woman is like, oh, this woman Catherine took him. MJ said that was okay because he knows her. We know MJ's not like in serious danger, but this is not good. This is very different from last season when Catherine was doing them a favor by babysitting MJ. Okay, like I acknowledge that. Mike is now livid, so he decides to tell Catherine that the whole time he was with her, he was just thinking about Susan. And this is the final straw for Catherine. She calls 911 and then she stabs herself. There's a lot happening, and okay, now that we've reached this point, I just want to note or discuss this whole Catherine storyline is generally very disliked by fans. So you don't have to be watching this thinking like, wow, what happened to Catherine? Because most viewers are asking the same thing. There's some parts of it I don't mind, but overall, I wish they would have just done something other than make so many of these women's lives revolve around this man. And like that said, Mike's a good guy, okay? Like, attractive, he's a plumber, he's friendly. Yes, he has a criminal record, but who does not on Wisteria Lane? It would not be fair to me to hold this man to a different standard than I would hold every other likable character on this wall. Like George Williams can go fuck himself, okay? I don't give a fuck about him. So all that is to say, yeah, this is not the best storyline, but at least she's on our screens, I guess. All right, to conclude this episode, we will go over to the Bolins. Nick tells Angie that he was at the cafe the night that waitress was killed, and therefore the detectives will probably want to pull his prints. The whole family is going to be in trouble since they are on the run after what Angie had described as an explosion of sorts. We still don't know exactly what happened. Anyways, Nick tells Angie that he called, quote, them, and Angie says something about, I killed a man, And Danny overhears all this and he runs upstairs crying. Danny also in this episode tells Julie that he wants to be with her despite her having an affair with his dad. And she's like, no, I'm good. When Angie goes upstairs, she finds Danny unconscious with a bunch of sleeping pills. When they leave the room and the nurse named Mona checks on Danny, he reveals that his name is actually Tyler. Mona is the little blue figure here. Sometimes I have a hard time deciding if somebody should be on the wall or not. So the way I usually judge it is based on how big of a role they play in whatever main housewives arc they are part of. So you can identify the main housewives by the ones who have colored paper backgrounds. Some of the main housewives are more main than others. Catherine arrived in season 4, for example, but she is still a main character. She takes on that kind of role in the ensemble. Therefore, I have her outlined. And Betty, she's only there for 1 season, but she is central to the season, therefore main character. Most of season 5 is about Dave's murderous plot against Mike and Susan. Therefore, I put his wife and daughter up here since that is his motive. And I have Dr. Helm up here to demonstrate even further how far he's willing to go. And then if there is a murder victim who is central, I try to have them on the wall. So we've got our 2 murder victims from their respective seasons. Season 6, episode 10. This season's disaster episode. It is Christmas time on Wisteria Lane. Everything is decorated for the Yuletide festival. And there is a plane flying pretty low. So there's just that kind of like looming threat and like, what the fuck? There are 4 big conflicts this episode. First, there is the Gabby Lynette family situation, lawsuit drama. And then there is the Orson, Bree, Carl love triangle. Third is something with the Bolins, which we'll get into. And fourth is the continuation of the Catherine cliffhanger from the episode before. Gabby and Lynette continue to fight, and Lynette feels like she has ruined her whole family over this because now she's out of a job and she was already feeling very uncertain about this baby on the way. So like everything is just kind of a disaster. Gabby and Lynette have a fight during their Jingle Bells performance. That is bells as in like women, like the bells. And yeah, they're just like this little choir at the Yuletide festival. Gabby goes as far as to say that she and Lynette are no longer friends, and Lynette tells her that she is selfish. For Bree, she delivers the parole blackmail to Orson, and she explains that he was going to blackmail her with the insurance fraud thing from season 5. But he's like, I was bluffing, Bree. I would never do that to you. But he never signed the damn papers, so I don't really believe that. Anyway, Orson finally signs the fucking divorce papers, and he goes and packs, and he tells Bree he will say goodbye to everyone at the little Christmas festival. By the way, Orson knows that Bree is having this affair, but he doesn't know it's with Carl. He just assumes it's with some random man, right? Now, remember, Bree has told Carl that he needs to prove he is a changed man in order for the 2 of them to get together. Now, Carl knows that Bree and Orson are officially over, so he feels he can step up and do something to prove he has changed. So he hires a small airplane to fly over the Fairview Christmas Festival with a banner that says, Bree, will you marry me? But when Carl shows up at the holiday festival, Orson is confused to see him there. Carl decides to tell Orson the truth, and the 2 of them fight in this little Santa house thing, and it gets pretty nasty, and Bree is in there with them trying to get them to calm down. Okay, Catherine. The cops and the ambulance arrive to help Catherine, who is bleeding quite a lot, and she tells them that it was Mike who stabbed her. Susan visits Catherine in the hospital, and Catherine is still stating that Mike stabbed her. So Susan decides to call Dylan and ask her to come see her mom. In case you have forgotten, Dylan is Catherine's daughter from season 4. Dylan comes into town because she's concerned about Catherine being allegedly stabbed by Mike. And this is when Susan discovers just how much Catherine has been lying to Dylan. As far as Dylan was told, Catherine and Mike are married currently, and Susan is the one who stabbed Catherine. But Susan is like, no. And she shows her the pictures from her wedding with Mike. And Dylan's like, oh. So then Dylan visits Catherine and reveals that she knows that Mike is in jail, but she wants to know if Catherine stabbed herself. And then Catherine is institutionalized. The scene is very upsetting. I do want to point out the parallels between this and I believe it's the penultimate episode of season 2, when Bree is trying to escape the mental hospital because of Matthew and Danielle and them being in trouble. And so they're just kind of redheads with trauma. The nurse, Mona, has kind of put together the true story based on the little things that Danny has told her. She goes to Angie and tells her that she knows they are in the witness protection program. And Angie's like, yes, we are. Mona ends up driving Danny home from the hospital. I don't remember why this became her responsibility, but it did. She starts talking about their family situation, meaning their participation in the witness protection program. But Danny doesn't know that. And so he starts talking, and he accidentally reveals to Mona that his family would be put in prison for a very long time because of terrorist acts if they were to be caught. So Mona decides to blackmail Angie. She wants $67,000, which is a year of living expenses, and in return, she will not tell anyone about what she knows. Angie gives Mona $10,000 and her ring, and that's all she has to give her right now. Mona is not very happy about being asked to settle for this low amount, so Angie decides to tell her a fuller truth about the family and what happened. We, as the audience, however, do not get to see what this is just yet. All right, to conclude the episode, the plane is flying really low, and then it swoops down and whacks Mona. The plane goes, along through this festival, and Celia Solis is standing there staring at it come towards her, and Lynette heroically jumps forward, grabs Celia, and gets her out of the way, thus saving her life. The plane also crashes into the Santa house where Bree, Carl, and Orson are, and that's the end of the episode. I love this episode. I love this episode. I love this episode. I will say, however, no, never mind. I like it. Season 6, episode 11. We're gonna kind of skim here because this is one of those episodes where it's a little what if episode. It's not only Susan imagining the different what ifs of if she had stayed with Carl. Everyone has a different little what if scenario, and I don't like any of them. So let's just stick with the facts. Susan gets to the hospital. Carl is in surgery. He was bleeding a lot. Orson is also in surgery. And later, we find out that Carl is dead. This is kind of a bummer. Bree Vandekamp cannot catch a break. It's one dead boyfriend after the next. Well, Carl, you came, you served cock, and then you died. Also, do you guys like my little plane? Gabby and Carlos decide that because Lynette saved Celia's life, they are going to forgive her. Lynette feels a sudden pain in her abdomen. She tells Tom she thinks there is something wrong with the babies. Turns out she has a torn placenta and she is rushed into surgery. One of the babies survives, and Tom tells Lynette it is all going to be okay. Orson is paralyzed from the waist down but survives. Mona is currently still alive, which is fucking nuts to me because the plane wing literally I don't know how she lived. I'm sorry. It doesn't make any sense that she did not die at the scene. But hey, that's medicine, I guess. During Angie's little daydream sequence here, we see there is a man named Patrick Logan who is after her, and that is important to canon Angie. So it's kind of interesting because we have all these ridiculous what if scenarios, and then Angie's is actually important to the plot. At least in that small way. This man, Patrick Logan, was apparently her ex-lover, and he ran everything that she was involved with. But after all that worry and Angie does, Mona passes away from her injuries. So we've got Mona as one victim of the plane crash, and we've got Carl as her other victim of the plane crash. Celia is almost hurt, but she is rescued by Lynette, and Orson is paralyzed from the waist down. Season 6, episode 12. Carl's will leaves Susan as a partial owner of a strip club. Carl invested in some businesses. This strip club is one of them, so Susan goes and checks the place out. but she's planning to sell her part of it. Nothing interesting with the Bolins this episode. All of the teenagers do hang out though, and Anna expresses some interest in Danny. Carlos, Gabby, Tom, Lynette all decide that Tom will fill in for Lynette at work until Lynette is ready to go back. Then Carlos tells Lynette that Tom told him that she was planning to stay home with the baby once the baby's born. Which, no, that was never discussed. And Tom and Lynette end up having a fight, not about that, but about how she is not willing to talk about the loss of one of the two twins. Bree goes to her pastor and confesses her sins, the extramarital affair, and he gives her some advice. And there's only one way that she can make this right, which is to accept Orson back into her home and her life and take care of him. That is the only way she can atone for her sins. And this bitch thinks she's fucking Carmela Soprano and is like, yeah, I have to do that. So she goes and grabs Orson, who is currently staying with Mrs. McCluskey, and brings him home. This is going to be a very difficult time for Orson, but that is why he should be around his friends. Doesn't the man have any friends? And yeah, Bree tells Orson there will no longer be a divorce, which I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand how divorce papers work, because I swear they signed some papers like 4 different times, right? Okay, maybe the papers weren't finalized because they signed them. Then the Yule Festival happened, so Carl had them and Carl died. Does that make sense? That must be what happened. They had this really quiet, awkward dinner together, and Orson tells Bree that he knows she's only being kind to him because of her guilty conscience. And that's when everything starts to just become a fucking nightmare between the pair of them. Last, but certainly not least, the Solises have an interesting storyline in this episode. It's nothing too convoluted, but I wanted to mention it. Juanita may be able to get a place at a Catholic school because that school is looking to diversify their student body. And this is something that the principal states to Gabby and Carlos at their interview. That's not my interpretation of it. And at this meeting, Juanita is stunned to learn that she is Mexican. Carlos and Gabby are like, Juanita! Like, where you been, girl? So the family kind of deals with some internalized racism / xenophobia this episode. It's very interesting. Gabby explains her struggle with poverty and shame and those parts of her background with Carlos. And she says that she does want her children to know that whatever they accomplish in life started on the shoulders of a strong Mexican man. So this is a lovely episode. I love their little family. Season 6, episode 13. So Bree puts his food out of reach so that he can't grab it. So Orson calls his physical therapist. He lies on the floor so that it looks like he fell and Bree left him there. And he tells his physical therapist that Bree is starving him. And the physical therapist says that if Bree doesn't start stepping up, then she's going to have to report her. It's all very reasonable when you look at the raw facts, right? Orson calls Bree a whore, and then Bree drags him outside, and Orson is refusing to bathe or shower despite Bree trying to get him to do so. Like, he will not cooperate, so she cannot get him into the bath. So she drags him outside and dumps soap on him and then sprays him down with the hose. Orson has a bit of a meltdown and explains that the reason he is being so difficult is because he is sick and tired of asking for help with everything. And it is so humiliating. And Bree asks for his forgiveness here, and they end up making up, and it looks like maybe they are on the path to a better future together. This episode, we also get a scene of Catherine with her therapist. She is on medication, and it is helping her delusions, and so she's feeling a lot better about like the whole Mike situation, but what she can't get over is how much she ruined her own life. But Mrs. McCluskey, Karen, stops by and tells her that the girls will have her back whenever she does decide to return to the lane. And Lynette, Gabby, and Bree show up to the hospital to tell Catherine in person that they will welcome her home whenever she is ready. And finally, Anna and Danny are now dating, and Angie really does not like that the two of them are together, but Lee warns Angie that if she tries to split them up, it's just going to make everything worse, and they're going to fight even harder to be together because they're teenagers. Season 6, episode 14. We start with Susan and the whole strip club thing. So in this episode, we meet Robin Gallagher. Here she is. She is a bookish stripper, and she does not really like this job. She wants to quit her job and do something else. And also, she's like reading a book at the club. Like, she's not like other girls. Susan gives her some really encouraging advice and tells her that she can do anything she sets her mind to, and that she believes in her and supports her, and She says that like it can be really scary to be uncertain about what's next in your life, but you're really brave and for wanting to try. And I'm like, okay, like that's a good Susan moment. When I watched the scene, it did not come across as like Susan being condescending or anything about the nature of Robin's current job. It's just Robin tells her she does not like her job. Susan supports. End of story. And I will say of Susan, after the wedding with Mike again, she has not bothered me as much as she used to in those earlier seasons. And in season 7 and 8, like I don't have to sit there rolling my eyes through Susan scenes. Like she's getting better, which I appreciate. I think it's just like this whole Catherine thing. Yeah, that's drama, but it's not on Susan's side of things. So when she's no longer like, freaking out about a man, like Edie said in her last scene with her before she died, fly high Edie, she's much more bearable. So slay. Anyways, Susan ends up giving Robin a job as her assistant. If you even remember, Susan is still working at MJ's school as an art teacher. Unfortunately, on her very first day, a dad recognizes Robin, and so she loses her job. Susan feels guilty because Robin has already quit her job, and it was because of Susan's advice and support. So she suggests that Robin move in with her and Mike so that she has a place to live while she finds a new job. Okay, on to Bree and Orson. Orson has started giving away some of his things to the other men in the neighborhood. So he's giving away some of his sporting things that it seems he won't really be able to use anymore, or at least not use in the same way. But he's also getting rid of some other little things like his guitar. And Bree's like, you can use that, Orson. Like, what are you doing? And then she stumbles across a document on Orson's computer and she's like, Orson, what is this? And he says, oh, that's my suicide note rough draft. So Orson was giving away his stuff so that he could take his own life. At a little party that Orson and Bree go to, Orson is about to roll himself into a pool, but luckily Bree stops him in time and she breaks down crying and she basically begs Orson not to drown himself. And she says, I've loved you once before. Can I love you again? I don't know. We'll see. For now, I guess we're back. Angie and Gabby have a disagreement about parenting because they are worried that Anna and Danny are going to start hooking up. Carlos actually catches Danny on top of Anna. They are just like making out. Carlos gets very physical with him, grabs him, pulls him off, and that's when Angie arrives and Mama Bear comes to play. Later on, Gabby and Carlos go over to the Bolins to apologize, but they overhear the Bolin family discussing something very secretive, and it's not like super obvious what's going on, but it gives Gabby and Carlos enough insight to know they're hiding something. Season 6, episode 15 is all about welcoming Robin to the neighborhood. It mostly revolves around Robin and people's concern that Susan let her move onto the lane. So Mike has a bad back. We know this. This has been a long established thing. You may recall his addiction to pain medication. That started because of his bad back. Robin gives him a massage and it helps a lot, so he asks her for another one and Robin's like, yeah. But then Susan starts to get jealous because Robin is like walking around the house in like her sports bra, being all sporty. Susan decides to tell her the truth about how she's feeling and says that Robin has got to go. And Robin starts to cry. She doesn't understand why everyone is just assuming the worst in her. Robin and Bree meet this episode, and Robin asks Bree if she will teach her how to make a cake. And she's never made a cake before, but Bree teaches her how to make a cake. And she wants to make a cake to thank Susan for everything she's done for her. So Bree helps her, and then in exchange, Robin offers her some sex advice. Bree gives Orson a lap dance. Robin goes and tells Lynette that Parker offered her money for sex. And of course, she said no, but Lynette completely blames Robin for the whole thing anyway. Eventually, though, Lynette does go back and apologize to Robin for treating her so poorly. Last but not least, there is a welcome home party for Catherine. All the guys there start flirting with Robin. Catherine, just home from her stay at the hospital, she's doing much better. She's feeling herself again. But she's all alone. She has an empty room, and Robin has nowhere to go. So she suggests Robin move in with her. The two women immediately start to bond, and Catherine is open and vulnerable with Robin about her experience at the hospital. And so Robin is open and vulnerable with Catherine. The two go out for some drinks, and after some guys are assholes to them and flirting with them and being all weird, Robin leans in and kisses Catherine. I just can't believe this is happening. I've waited 6 seasons. Later that night, they get home and Robin tells Catherine she's gay. Catherine is a little stunned, but she's okay with it. Like, she'll have a gay woman live with her. Not a big deal. Nothing to worry about. The next day, Robin tells Karen, Mrs. McCluskey, that she feels so seen here. Because people have started to be nice to her and see all she has to offer and how kind she is and all that stuff. And Catherine has noticed, according to Mary Alice's voiceover, Robin's beauty. And also, according to Mary Alice's voiceover, she's surprised to discover that she likes what she sees. Oh my god. Women's stories matter. They just matter. This is so exciting. Okay, one more thing on the Bolins. I'm really excited, but I have to bring it in. Gabby tries to get Anna and Danny to break up by getting Anna a modeling agent in New York City, so she has to move right away. And so she does move right away, but Danny follows after her. Season 6, episode 16. Okay, the fact that Danny has run off to New York could be big trouble. We don't know exactly why, but we get the feeling that, like, there's some people the Bolins used to know in New York. It's just a dangerous place to be. Kind of a mess over here. Let's talk about Bree. We finally turn away from the Bree Orson stuff and focus a little more on Bree's business again, which is very fun. So there is a new employee who's giving Andrew all sorts of problems. His name is Tad. Tad is just not the brightest bulb in the bunch. He's messing up a lot, and Bree kind of wants to fire him, but Andrew's like, no, we can't do that. I like Tad. He's nice. He's really good at the job. But it turns out that Andrew is just sleeping with Tad, and that's why he wants him around. And then this new guy shows up. His name is Sam. Here is Sam. And he tells Bree that he wants a job. And he is very forward and prepared and confident. Shows up, basically tells her all the things that he could fix with their company and all these ideas he has. So Bree kind of has no choice but to hire him. But we soon see that Sam is very manipulative, which is a little suspicious. It's possible he's not just confident and hardworking with his job, but also maybe hiding something. So Susan asks Roy and Karen when they're getting married, and then they're like, good question, I guess we're engaged. So they're engaged, but then Karen goes to the doctor and they discover a spot on her lung, and she is diagnosed with cancer. Roy was developing all this anxiety about losing his independence if he settled down and married Karen, but now he realizes that Karen is all he needs. Now on to Catherine. Back when I was a teenager, I discovered a scene on YouTube from this show. It seemed very interesting to me. I was compelled by the characters and the conflict. This scene is from this episode. So what happens is Robin gets up in the morning and Catherine has already made breakfast for her, like waffles and syrup. And Robin spills some syrup on her bra, and so she like swipes it off and like licks it, and it's this very like sensual thing. And like Catherine's staring at her and like having gay panic. And then Catherine wakes up and it was all a dream. I was moved. I was like, I need to know what's going to happen, because that was the first time I saw a queer couple in television. So I really was interested in like, if this woman is having dreams about Robin, what does that mean? And I didn't even know their names. I knew nothing about this show, but watching that clip is what got me to watch Desperate Housewives when I was like 14. So now you know. And the stuff Catherine goes through last episode through the next couple remains one of my favorite parts of the show. Anyways, Catherine talks about this dream with her therapist and explains she's not really sure like what's going on. She doesn't think she's attracted to women, but she is now. All of these feelings are starting to kind of freak Catherine out a little bit, and so she tells Robin she needs to leave. Robin goes upstairs and starts to pack, and then Catherine has a change of heart, and she walks upstairs, goes in Robin's room, and closes the door behind her, implying that Catherine is going to make a move. Season 6, episode 17. We learn that Mike has been facing some financial difficulties, and Susan used part of the money from selling the strip club to pay off some of his debt, which Mike is less than happy about because it's his responsibility. He didn't want Susan to clean up his mess for him. We are starting to propel now towards the finale episodes, so hold on tight. Things are going to get a little faster paced. So Bree gives Sam a promotion, and this causes increased tensions between him and Andrew. In fact, at one meeting, Andrew goes as far as to physically push Sam. Bree feels terrible about the whole situation, so she brings some apology muffins to Sam's trailer for him. The doors open, so she's able to let herself right in to drop off the muffins, and that's when she sees a picture of a young Sam with Rex Vandekamp, Bree's late first husband, Rex Vandekamp. Sam gets home, sees Bree looking at the picture, and reveals to Bree that Rex Vandekamp is his father. Rex had a one-night stand before he met Bree. Sam was born, and that's that. On to the Scabos. Preston comes home with Irina, this blonde woman from Europe. He introduces her to the family as his girlfriend. He has bought her all these nice things, and right away, Lynette begins to suspect that Irina might be a gold digger. And it's not that Preston has a ton of money, but he has enough, and he really prioritizes buying her nice things above everything else. So it doesn't really matter how much he has, because she's still cashing out. He later tells the family that he proposed and Irina said yes. And after a quick test of Irina using a ring and telling her it's a real one and her figuring out it's not, Lynette is able to determine that Irina is a gold digger and she's not a good woman for Preston. Let's talk about Catherine now. So Catherine goes to Bob and Lee to ask them for advice about being gay. Mostly her questions are things about questioning her identity and how, if she is queer, would that change her past experiences and stuff. She does, however, go to Robin and she tells her that their night together was a mistake because she was drunk and she didn't really mean anything. And Robin was like, I saw the way you looked at me when we were having sex, and that's just not true. You were into me. It counted. And Catherine takes a moment, but it's like, okay, it counted. So the honesty and the vulnerability here. I love you, Catherine, and I love you, Dana Delaney, who, as I have stated before, has been very supportive of all the lesbian Desperate Housewives fans, and she is very lovely. We have like a handful of shows where there are teenage characters discovering their identities. We don't really have so many adult characters who are coming to their own identity. I mean, there's like Miranda and Just Like That, I guess. But otherwise, it's usually like played off as a joke. I don't know, there are layers to these things, and it's surprising, but it's not played for laughs. Okay, I'll move on now. In New York City, Danny visits Anna first and tells her that Gabby only sent her there to split the two of them up. Danny then visits his grandmother. Gabby and Angie make their way to New York City to track down the kids, and Angie repeats to her mother that she is concerned that someone named Patrick Logan is after them. After Angie says something to the grandmother that we as the audience don't see, she tells Danny that he can't live there with her. He has to go back and live with his parents, but they'll talk all the time and it will be okay. A neighbor asks Gabby who the woman is the grandmother is talking to, so Gabby tells her that it is her daughter. Shortly after, Angie reveals to Gabby that Patrick Logan is Danny's father. This episode's Bolin family storyline concludes when the neighbor who Gabby spoke to calls Patrick and tells her that she knows where Angie is. Season 6, episode 18. Our momentum continues. Danielle comes into town to meet Sam, and she and Sam and Andrew all have this argument. Mostly it's between Andrew and Sam. Danielle, can't really be bothered to care all that much. She's just there for the vibes. And I think Sam secretly kind of likes the drama. Lynette is upset about Preston and Irina having sex in the house. And so Preston decides, you're right, Mom. I will get an apartment for me and my future wife. So Preston decides he will put off college to get a job instead so that he can afford an apartment for him and Irina. Irina starts getting more devious and cunning towards Lynette, and she demands that the wedding be pushed up. So now Preston is going to marry Irina literally next week. We get to see Patrick Logan visit the neighbor to get more information from her in person. After he gets the information, he kills her. It's not good out here. There's a lot of people dying. Okay, lastly, Catherine. There's a reason I saved hers for last this time. Catherine and Robin discuss their situationship a little more. And there is this I survived cancer party for Karen because she had a surgery and she's in remission now. While they have a moment of silence for Karen, these two end up fighting outside the window, out on the porch. And Catherine exclaims, just as the room goes silent, just because I like having sex with you doesn't make me a lesbian. So of course everyone's staring at them, but Catherine decides that with all of this pressure on them from the neighborhood, she can't really explore her identity any further, let alone try to have a fulfilling relationship with Robin. So she tells Robin that she has to leave, but that she wants her to go with her. So the two of them decide to go off to Paris together. This sort of sounds like fan fiction or my headcanon, they tragically die and I'm like, oh no, they're just in Paris. I've done that with other characters. Not on this show or in my recaps, but I mean in real life. But no, this is just what happens. They go off to Paris together. So obviously I don't have to put little tombstones over them. But I could do a little Eiffel Tower or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, Dana Delaney does indeed leave the show at this point, which is very sad because I love her. But I guess it was just time. After the whole Mike fiasco, I'm glad they gave her at least one good, compelling, interesting, heartwarming storyline this season. Season 6, episode 19. Mike's car gets repossessed because he can't make the payments on it. He needs more work, more money. So MJ starts clogging their own sink because he wants his daddy to have work. It's so sad. And yeah, Susan goes around clogging all the neighbors' stuff and finding issues that Mike can fix. But Mike doesn't want Susan to help him find this work. In this episode, Gabby overhears Bob and Lee talking about some baby stuff. They want to have a baby. They are just having a hard time finding an egg donor. And so Gabby's like, I'll do it. You can have my eggs. Carlos doesn't really want her to do this at first, but Gabby is like, Carlos, this is my decision to make. And he's like, oh, okay. So she's planning to donate her eggs. The more they talk about it, though, the more it becomes clear that Gabby really isn't able to separate herself from the idea of this baby. And she's always talking about how she will be in the baby's life and kind of help Bob and Lee raise the baby. And so they're like, yeah, let's not do this. But that was kind of their last option to have a baby. Lee leaves Bob. We can only have one happy gay couple at a time on Wisteria Lane. I actually don't know what the reason behind this was. I don't know if Lee's actor had to leave the show for a period of time, or what, but yeah, he goes, okay, Bree. Andrew reveals to Bree that Sam didn't actually finish his MBA, and Sam's excuse for lying is that he had to drop out of school to take care of his terminally ill mother. Okay, reasonable enough. Sam is looking through expense reports and is able to determine that Andrew took some company money by overcharging clients for wine and vodka. Bree fires Andrew as a result. At a very important event, Sherry is replaced with vinegar, and Sam suggests that maybe it was Andrew who did it because he was the one who had access to that cupboard. But Orson suggests, as well as the audience is thinking right now, that it might have actually been Sam and he's trying to frame Andrew. Lynette gets a little more dirt on Irina in this episode. She takes her bridal dress shopping, and while they're in the shop, Irina takes a call from some man in Russia, and the dress keeper who speaks Russian is able to tell Lynette that she is up to no good. Lynette does not want to go to Preston's wedding. And it's only like 30 minutes away. And what do you know? A woman from immigration shows up with Irina's file just in time. It turns out she has been married twice before and is just there to con Preston out of money. So Preston calls off the wedding, and Lynette goes to him and tells him that he did the right thing, and if he hates her for her part in uncovering Irina's situation, she understands. So Irina just leaves with her suitcase, starts walking down the street, and Eddie, remember Eddie? This guy? This kid right here, who's friends with Danny? And he was there when Susan yelled at Danny and almost crushed him with the car. Like, you're with me, right? Eddie is like, I'll drive you, and he thinks she's really hot, so since he knows that Preston is no longer getting married to her, he's like, okay, maybe it's my shot. But then when she insults him and like laughs at him, he strangles her. Holy shit. So you're telling me that allegedly that this guy, who's kind of been around hanging out with the teenagers when they're all hanging out, but has never been like looked at as suspicious, is the killer? Love it. Love it. When I rewatched this season, I had no fucking idea who the killer was. I, for the life of me, could not remember. They could have given us more clues, but I don't mind it because there are other mysteries this season. It steps us away from some of the tropes that Desperate Housewives has used to resolve mysteries in the past, which is really fun to see for its 6th season. I love this season, you guys. I love this season. I think it is solid almost all around. There are some plots I don't like, but that is true in every season. So let's finish out this episode. Patrick arrives at the coffee shop in town and meets Danny. He tells Danny he's a writer. He doesn't know what to write next in his book, and it's about this woman who was really bad and she took this guy's kid, and so he's after the woman to try and get some sort of revenge. Then he decides that he thinks his book character, instead of hurting the woman who took his child, he might just take the child instead. And Danny's like, that's a good idea. Season 6, episode 20. This episode revolves completely around Eddie and gives us some more of his backstory. So it starts when Eddie's mother, who is an alcoholic, goes into Eddie's room to search for a bottle of scotch that she suspects he's hiding from her. Under his pillow, she finds a scrapbook filled with news articles about the stranglings in town. Through Mary Alice having known this woman, we get some flashbacks of Eddie's childhood and youth. We see Mary Alice jog by on the day that Eddie's father left when he was 4. Mary Alice returns to check in on the family and finds that Eddie, who is now 4 years old, has been left at home by himself. Eddie's mother even tells him, "It's not my fault you ruined my life." His mom is just terrible. Eddie's mother never took him seriously. When he tells her that he has a crush on someone, she laughs in his face and implies that he will never find anyone to love him, and that is deeply upsetting to him. And so he has kind of a last resort to find someone who will love him, gets some flowers, and goes to a sex worker. And she's gonna sleep with him, but then he's like, hold on, and he wants to present the flowers and like make it this meaningful thing, and she laughs at him, so he strangles her. It's very upsetting to watch, and so we are putting together the pieces that Irina laughed at him, and so maybe that's why she became a victim. We don't know about the waitress and stuff, though. During all of the wedding drama with Mike and Susan, Eddie was actually over because he's interested in art, and so Susan was kind of helping him learn and such. And Eddie says to her that he would marry Susan, and Susan laughs at him. And so that is why Eddie attacked Julie that night. He thought that she was Susan. In the present day, when Eddie's mom confronts him about the scrapbook, he confesses to the murders. She freaks out, calls the phone to call the police, and he murders her. And that's when Lynette shows up to ask Eddie if he would like to come live with her. She knows that he's having a hard time. His mom's a drunk, and he's having all kinds of social issues. So he really just needs a stable place to live. that's why she reaches out to him, and Eddie has to hide his mother's body. Season 6, episode 21. Sam is speaking to a woman at the market. Turns out this woman is indeed his mother. She's not dead like Bree was told. Rex sent her a letter years ago saying that he wanted full custody, but she didn't give in, and Sam recently found that letter and he's been angry ever since. Bree confronts Sam about his lie and he becomes angry and sort of violent towards her. So Bree goes and tells Andrew that she is scared of Sam. Eddie and Porter have a little bit of a scuffle after Porter is rude to Lynette, and it makes Eddie mad enough that he tackles Porter to the floor. Lynette tells him that behavior can never happen again, and she also tells Danny that she grew up with an alcoholic mother and in a really unstable household, so she understands what it's like to feel angry and sad, and she wants to help him through this. So she teaches him some breathing exercises and says that maybe she should help him get to a therapist. So she's doing all the right things, trying to look after this teenager who's not her responsibility, but is a friend of her son's, so she's just trying to do what she can. That is a mother. Eddie's therapy session is a little bit rough, so the therapist suggests that they try and get Eddie's mother in the room as well. So Lynette goes over to try and talk to her. Patrick overhears Nick discussing his plans to go for a run that night, and Patrick hits Nick with his car. But he lives, bitch! He lives! And he wants Angie to take Danny and run, and Danny agrees to go into hiding until this whole thing blows over. Patrick goes straight to the Boland's house and confronts Angie at home, and he's pretty much like, I'm gonna stay here. But Angie is just glad that Danny is safe and Nick is in the hospital being looked after, so she's kind of the only one she has to worry about now. Season 6, episode 22. Susan and Mike continue to struggle financially. Susan ends up suggesting that they put their house up for rent and move somewhere else just until they get back on their feet. So it is decided Susan will leave Wisteria Lane. Bree, Orson, and Andrew decide that they're going to try and get Sam out of their life. So Bree offers to cut Sam a pretty generous check. Sam tears it up and says he doesn't want money, and if she ever insults him like that again, she's going to wish she hadn't. Bree decides to try and work against threats by bringing over some policemen she knows who she's buddy with. We've never seen these men before. She makes it clear that she will be protected if he tries to mess with her. But then Sam comes by with some papers and tells her she is going to sign over her company to him. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want validation. He now just wants to cause whatever pain he can in his family and take whatever he can from Bree, since Rex is no longer alive to take things from. Bree, of course, is like, I'm not going to sign over my company. Then Sam tells her that Danielle told him all of their family secrets, including the fact that Andrew hit Juanita Solis with a car years ago when they covered it up. Bet you didn't think that would ever come back, did you? But here it is. Things come full circle on this show. Okay, and we're not even to season 8 yet, but things just keep coming around, and this is good shit. Okay. All right, some kids find Irina's body in the woods. The cops come and tell the Scavos that Irina is dead, and Preston is taken in for questioning. He's really not a suspect or anything, but since he's the last one to have seen her, they just need to question him, right? So Lynette goes to the police station with him. It is there that she overhears 2 cops talking about how they also found the body of Eddie's mother. Lynette goes to Eddie's and is trying to break the terrible news to him when Eddie tells Lynette his mother is fine. In fact, he just heard from her, and she's in Florida, and she should be back from her bender soon. Eddie drops his bag to the floor and tells Lynette that he wishes she hadn't come here. We finally get some answers about what the fuck happened with this family. So Angie was an eco-terrorist, and she built a bomb in the past, and now Patrick wants her to build another one. So she's sitting there like wiring up this bomb for like several scenes. I'm like, okay, women in STEM, I guess. Danny comes home because Patrick sent a text from Angie's phone telling him to hurry home. Angie's kind of being held hostage by Patrick in her home. Like, she's in immediate danger. And Gabby shows up to ask for an opinion on a lasagna recipe that she made. So Angie stuffs a little SOS note into the lasagna when she hands it back, and Gabby doesn't see it right away because she literally throws the lasagna away, assuming Angie didn't like it since she sent it back with her. But the girls end up digging through the lasagna in the trash, and Gabby finds the note, so she's able to identify Angie needs help. Season 6, episode 23, the season 6 finale. We have quite a few moving plots in this, so we're just going to go one at a time. Let's start with a plot that is yet to be affiliated with any known character. We have a maternity nurse from Fairview Hospital who is on her deathbed. She wants to make a confession. She confesses to a priest who's about to deliver her last rites that she made a terrible mistake, and she wants the hospital to see that the mistake is corrected. Later on in the episode, we learn that one of the children was switched at birth at Fairview Hospital. That remains an unknown until next season, so we're going to put a pin in that for now. Bree tells Orson about the blackmail, and this is Orson's first time hearing that Andrew is responsible for the death of Juanita Solis. You know how Orson and Bree kind of repaired their marriage for like 4 episodes? Well, that's all out the window now because Bree made Orson go to prison for a hit and run. Meanwhile, her own son was responsible for another hit and run, but she just protected him. And Bree says it is not the same. She had no choice. And Orson says, we always have a choice, and I choose to no longer be your husband. Andrew comes over and sees that all of Orson's things are gone, and Bree asks Andrew for permission to go to Gabby and tell her the truth about what happened with Juanita Solis. The last we see of them this season is 2 of them walking away, and Mary Alice's voiceover telling us a secret is being revealed that could change their friendship forever. Let's go over to Lynette. So Eddie tells her she wishes she hadn't come, and in the conversation that follows, Eddie tells Lynette that he is responsible for the other murders that have occurred. While she is kind of being held hostage at Eddie's house, Lynette goes into labor. The boys notice that Lynette has not been home, so Tom goes looking for her, including at Eddie's house. But he knocks on the door, no one answers. She tries to scream, Eddie puts his hand over her mouth. So now Lynette is being held hostage by a serial killer, and he will not let her go to the hospital, and she is explaining, Eddie, I'm going to have a baby, and this is already a high-risk, complicated pregnancy. She needs to go to a hospital. He will not let her go. So she's like, okay, then you're going to have to help me deliver the baby. So she's pushing the baby out, and the umbilical cord is around its neck. She tells Eddie that he needs to reach around the baby's head and untangle the cord, and he does it, saves the baby. Lynette is okay, baby's okay. And then, riding the hormones of this traumatic evening, Lynette tells Eddie that he really needs to go to the police and that she will be so proud of him if he does so that he can make things right. She tells him he will never be able to let go of his anger until he's confessed to what he's done. Patrick just keeps moving the goalpost around. Now he wants Angie to go with him to Oregon to build the bomb. He says that if anything goes wrong with the bomb and it doesn't explode for whatever reason, he will kill her and kill Danny. Angie and Patrick are in the car together, and Angie has a little detonator remote for the bomb. She assumes it's in the car with them, but then Patrick reveals that he left the bomb in the house with Danny, and he plans to detonate the bomb and turn them around so that Angie has to watch the house explode. He takes the detonator, presses the detonate button, and it begins a countdown from like 20 or something. So Angie screams for Danny, gets out of the car, starts sprinting towards the house. And then when she's far enough away and the bomb is close enough to exploding, she turns around and waves at Patrick because the bomb was in the detonator the whole time. Her mind. She played him right back, and the car explodes, and that presumably is the death of Patrick. I do need to put up a few tombstones, so I apologize for the delay, but I just wanted to get through, that little chunk of episodes. Once things settle down, Gabby gives the Bolins some money so they can get out of town. They decide to send Danny to New York, and Nick and Angie go to Atlanta. The FBI is still looking for them, so it's going to be a little while before they can be a happy family again, but for now, they're out of harm's way. Patrick Logan, who was one of their biggest threats, is dead, and they can go on living their lives, just not on Wisteria Lane. And finally, Susan leaves Wisteria Lane and welcomes her new renter to the home. Who's renting her house, you may wonder? It's none other than Mr. Paul Young. So what the hell happened? How is Paul back? Why did he rent the house? Who is this man, you may be asking, if you've just binge watched these recaps and not seen the show. All fair questions, and all will be answered next time on my unhinged recap of Desperate Housewives Season 7. So that does it for Season 6. Let's end with some concluding thoughts. I love this season. I think it is the best the show has been in a while. This season I love for a very different reason than Season 1. Season 1 I love, and I think it is among the strongest because all the pieces come together. This season works so wonderfully for me because the pieces coexist so well. There's no single mystery, which really works to its benefit, because if the whole season was on the shoulders of Eddie being the strangler, it would fall kind of flat. If it were all on the shoulders of what's the truth about the Boleyns, and it was like, oh, there was a bomb 17 years ago. It's like, that's crazy, but that doesn't give us anything like very active to do. That's just exposition. So we need something to be discovering at all times, and there's so much in this season. On the topic of Eddie, they do a good job with his story, and I don't think they make him too sympathetic, but they still make us care enough to watch his episode and be scared for Lynette when she's alone with him, and justify why he doesn't kill Lynette, if that makes sense. Eddie is one of many stories of cyclical trauma or generational experiences that the show will continue to explore in the final 2 seasons. I think I'll get a little more into that in Season 7, and then even more in Season 8. They brought back John Rollin, which is exciting. There is now the promise of bringing back Paul Young. Very exciting headed into Season 7. Again, we'll wait till next time. I won't unpack too much. The Boleyns are wonderful. Drea De Matteo is lovely in this show. I think she does a great job and brings something fresh to Wisteria Lane. Having them possibly involved with the Julie mystery is very exciting, and I'm glad that it didn't end up being one of them, because it would feel too linear, a little too simple, like, oh, the new neighbors move in. It must be them who did it. So the fact that it's not, and it's just some character who, despite only seen in a handful of episodes, feels very close to home and comfortable, works really well. I love it. What else do I love? I love every time the Solis girls get screen time. Their screen time continues to build as the series goes on, so hopefully Season 7, I'll get to share a few more of them because I love them. I just want to say I love Roy. He's a lovely addition to the cast as well. There are so many elements of mystery tucked into one season. So just to name a few, there is the Boleyns, like what's their story? There is the strangling. There is Bree and Sam. And then like drama-wise, we've got the plane crash, of course, iconic. The whole Catherine thing, which like, it's balanced out by Catherine and Robin. Of course, Brie and Carl, like there are just moving parts everywhere. It's getting a little messy, and we love it. If I were to think about sitting down and rewatching Season 6, the part that I would be dreading rewatching the most is probably the Catherine and Mike storyline. But the season is very watchable despite that. Even looking back at like Season 3, which I consider to be one of my favorites, that season has storylines that like I don't want to sit through again. So many of the Susan storylines in the first 3 seasons, I just don't want to sit through again, and I don't have the strength to do it anytime soon. So if you've seen the show, I'm curious to hear what you think. If we're looking just at seasons 1 through 6, how would you rank them? What do you think? Season 6 is definitely up there for me. I think seasons 1, 3, and 6 are the ones I prefer out of the season so far. And then 5 is probably the weakest season. But I'd love to hear y'all's opinions. I know we all favor different types of storylines, so I'm definitely interested to hear what you all have to say. That about does it for me this time. I will catch you soon with Season 7 Also, be on the lookout for my Pushing Daisies retrospective video essay, which I don't know when that will be out, before or after season 7. Who knows? But be sure to hit the subscribe button down below so that you don't miss all my latest shenanigans. Leaving a comment or like also lets the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoyed this video and others might too, so it's more likely to be recommended to new viewers. If you want to go above and beyond to support the channel, you can do so via Ko-fi, link in bio, or by pushing the super thanks button directly below this video. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye!